My name is Jillian. I am 27 years old, and probably for most of my life I have considered myself incredibly lucky to have a close-knit, strong family, where my parents, who have lived together for 30 years, have always remained for each other not only spouses, but also best friends, where my older sister Vanessa, despite there was a 3-year age difference, and she was not just a relative, but the closest person to me, the only one I could trust with any thoughts, fears, and dreams, knowing that I would be understood and supported. We have always been by each other's side, for better or for worse, but I could not even imagine that this particular year would be a real test for us, which would jeopardize our ties and force us to reconsider many beliefs. It all started about a year ago, when Vanessa's world collapsed with terrifying speed, leaving behind only fragments that she did not know how to assemble. Her husband Mark, with whom she had been married for almost 10 years, turned out to be a traitor, and his betrayal was not an accident or a passing fling that could be attributed to a mistake. He had been dating a work colleague for several months, and when Vanessa found out everything, he not only did not repent, but packed his things, leaving her alone with 2 children. It was not just a breakup, but a painful, humiliating process, accompanied by loud quarrels, screams, and tears, in which, unfortunately, the boys were involved. 9-year-old Ethan and 7-year-old Lucas, who in an instant lost their usual home, peace, and confidence that their parents would always be together. I remember the day Vanessa came to me a week after Mark left, and sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee in her trembling hands, she sobbed as if she had no strength left to hold back. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying and sleepless nights. Her voice trembled when she tried to speak, but what struck me most was not her appearance, but the emptiness in her gaze, the despair that cannot be expressed in words. "I do not know how I will cope," she whispered, staring into the mug, as if the answer to all her questions was hidden there, at the bottom. "We'll figure it out," I said, squeezing her cold fingers tightly. "You're not alone in this." And I really thought so. Our parents didn't hesitate for a second, but joined in the process, taking on some of the worries. Every Sunday we filled her refrigerator with food so that she wouldn't have to worry about what to feed the children, and I, knowing that Vanessa's salary alone wouldn't be enough for rent, offered to pay half of what was for it. Was a huge amount for me, but when I saw with what relief she accepted the help, I realized that I had done the right thing. I changed my work schedule, trying to be as flexible as possible, because I had to not only support my sister, but also take care of my nephews. Finishing work at 4 o'clock, I stopped by my parents, picked up Ethan and Lucas, drove them to my place, helped with homework, cooked dinner, and in the evening Vanessa came for them. On weekends, I would take the boys to my place and arrange entertainment for them, whether it was going to the cinema, museum, or amusement rides, so that they would not feel abandoned and unhappy. "Aunt Jillian, you're the best," Lucas exclaimed one day, beaming with happiness when I handed him a handful of slot machine tokens. "I know," I replied jokingly, but I felt warm inside, realizing that I was doing everything right. The first few months went surprisingly smoothly. Vanessa was grateful, found time to say thank you, sometimes brought me my favorite caramel latte or a freshly baked croissant as a sign of appreciation, and even though I was tired, I realized that it was harder for her than for me, and I was ready to do anything for her peace of mind. But after about 4 months, something started to change. At first it was the little things. One evening Vanessa was almost an hour and a half late for the boys. "I'm sorry, it's been a crazy job," she said quickly, not even looking at me. The following week, she was delayed again, then again, and again. I tried to ignore it, but one day she didn't arrive until 7:15, and a few days later, 2 hours after the promised time. I looked at my sister, not trying to hide my annoyance, because despite all my love and patience, despite the fact that I understood how hard it was for her after the divorce, I couldn't just close my eyes to what had been happening in recent weeks. Vanessa might have hoped that I would brush everything off, pretend that nothing terrible had happened, but I couldn't let this go on. "I'm sorry," I repeated, folding my arms over my chest and squinting. "You're just sorry after you didn't come to pick up your kids, didn't answer your phone, and left me wondering if something serious had happened to you. She rolled her eyes, sighing wearily, but there was no remorse in this gesture, only annoyance. Jillian, please don't start. I was delayed, then my phone went dead, and then I just thought that you were with them anyway, which means that everything is fine. It's not a problem, right? I let out a small, bitter laugh, because her words and tone were such blatant disregard for my efforts that I didn't have the energy to be angry anymore. Not a problem. Vanessa, I want you to look at the situation from the other side. Imagine that you arrange to meet with me at a certain time, but I don't answer the phone, and then I show up the next day and say, "Oh, the phone is dead." Wouldn't you be mad? She frowned, and then quickly hid her annoyance behind a smile that might have worked for others, but not for me. Come on, don't be dramatic, it's okay. The boys are safe, they had a great time, didn't they? She turned to the children sitting on the couch, clearly trying to get them on her side. Lucas nodded happily without looking up from the TV screen, but Ethan looked directly at his mother and frowned slightly. We had a great time, but we didn't know where you were, he said seriously. And Aunt Jillian was worried. I saw Vanessa tense up for a moment and then relax again, as if she was trying to convince herself that this was an insignificant episode, not worth paying attention to. I'm sorry, baby, Mom just needed some time for herself, she said, coming up and stroking his head, but he evaded the touch. The gesture was so quick, almost imperceptible, but it made me clench my jaw. Vanessa, we need to talk, I said, heading for the kitchen, knowing that if I didn't clear up all the boundaries right now, the situation would only get worse. She followed me, picking up a mug from the table and pretending to be completely relaxed, but I could see that she was actually tense as a string. Okay, speak up, I'm listening, she said with a hint of sarcasm. Vanessa, you're using me, I said bluntly, not wanting to beat around the bush anymore. I don't mind helping, I don't mind taking care of the boys, but for the last few weeks you've just disappeared without warning, forcing me to take full responsibility. I want to know what's going on. She looked away, took a long sip of coffee, and then set the mug down on the table. I don't understand what the problem is, she finally said. You offered to help yourself, and you're doing a great job of it. I frowned. That's the point, Vanessa. It's not a help if I become the only person who takes care of your children at the moment when you want it. I'm not disappearing, she crossed her arms over her chest. I'm trying to feel alive again, you know? After everything Mark did, after I felt broken and worthless, I'm finally starting to be myself again. Is it bad? I took a deep breath. No, it's not bad, I said more softly. But why can't you just tell me the truth? Why didn't you tell me you were dating someone? Why am I learning about this from Ethan? She shuddered. Did he tell you? He figured it out because you were acting different, Vanessa. He's not a little kid who doesn't notice anything. She turned away, stood in silence for a moment, and then wearily ran her hand through her hair. Okay, fine, she finally admitted. Yes, I'm dating someone. His name is Daniel. We met a few months ago. He's amazing. Caring. Funny. He's not like Mark. I didn't want to talk about it because you and Mom and Dad would start asking questions, you'd start worrying. I just wanted to enjoy it while I could. I stared at her for a long time. We're not worried because you're dating someone, I finally said. Because you're acting like it's your only priority. She shrugged her shoulders. And if that's the case? I sighed. Vanessa, your children need you. I can't replace their mother. I'll help you as much as I can, but you can't count on me to take care of everything. It's not fair. She looked thoughtful, but I wasn't sure if my words really got through to her. I'll think about it, she finally said. And with that, she returned to the living room, smiling at the boys, and I remained standing in the kitchen, realizing that this conversation had not solved anything. I silently stared at the phone screen, rereading the short messages that Vanessa sent with an indifferent efficiency, as if I were not her sister, but a babysitter who worked by the hour, on whom you can dump any duties without warning and even without the elementary "thank you." I'm late. Feed the boys dinner. Lucas forgot his math textbook at your place. Can you bring them tomorrow? The boys will stay with you for the night. I have plans. She didn't even ask, didn't specify if I could, if I was comfortable, just confronted me with the fact. And, most importantly, I wasn't going to discuss what happened that night when we were arguing in the kitchen while Ethan and Lucas were uncertainly peeking out the door, trying to figure out why their mom was suddenly angry at Aunt Jillian, who was always there for them. At first, I tried to be patient, convincing myself that this was just a temporary cooling off, that Vanessa would think about everything, cool down, and maybe even apologize, but days and weeks passed and nothing changed. We turned into strangers, forced to cross paths only because of the boys, and when she came for them, our conversations were reduced to routine phrases. They've already had dinner, I said, looking at her over the rim of my tea mug. Thanks, she replied, without looking up from the phone. Ethan has a test tomorrow. We repeated the material. Good. That's all. She turned around and left, and I remained standing in the doorway, trying to cope with conflicting feelings, anger, resentment, fatigue. But the most annoying thing was that it started to break me down. I began to notice how tired I get faster, how annoyed I get at work for nothing, how I miss meetings with friends, because I know that at any moment Vanessa can write again, ask again, force me to put her children above everything else again. And I couldn't refuse. Because I loved Ethan and Lucas. Because it wasn't their fault that their mother now believed that taking care of them was not her personal responsibility, but a family duty that could be shifted to me. But at one point, my patience ran out. It was Friday night, and I had just returned home after an exhausting day at the office, where the deadline loomed over us like a thundercloud. I just wanted to grab a glass of wine, wrap myself in a blanket and turn on some kind of movie that didn't require mental activity. And, of course, the phone vibrated. I need to stay late. Will you take the boys away from their parents? I stared at the message for a long time, feeling the dull irritation give way to something more, the realization that if I don't set boundaries now, the situation will never change. I didn't answer right away. For the first time in all this time. As I sat staring at my phone, it vibrated again. Did you take them? After another 5 minutes. Jillian? And then the bell rang. I pressed the answer button, and before she could say anything, I said firmly, "No, Vanessa." What? There was surprise in her voice. No, I'm not going after the boys. It's Friday, and I had plans. Your children are your responsibility. A second of silence. Really? There was a hint of indignation in her voice. Are you mad? Is it because of that argument, right? It's not about arguing, it's about the fact that you constantly expect me to back you up without even asking if I can. I love Ethan and Lucas, but I'm not their mother. I can't be their mother. There was another pause, but now there was something cold and wary in it. Well, okay, I see, she said dryly. I'm sorry for wasting your precious time. Vanessa, that's not what I'm talking about. But she had already dropped the call. I clutched the phone in my hand, feeling not just irritation rise up inside, but real anger. Didn't she really understand? Or did she just not want to understand? The next morning, I decided to call my mom, knowing that if Vanessa had already complained to her, then I would have another unpleasant conversation. Good morning, Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Good morning. Her voice was strained, as if she had already been waiting for this call. You didn't go after the boys. No, she didn't, I exhaled. Because Vanessa has to decide for herself how to combine her life with the duties of a mother. Jillian, you know how difficult it was for her after the divorce, Mom sighed. She has endured so much, endured so much. She's just trying to find her happiness. I asked, feeling a lump rise in my throat. I also went through this year with her. I also endured no less. I pay for her place, pick up her children, organize their time, cook for them, take care of them. When did any of you ever think of me, Mom? There was silence on the other end of the line, and I felt like I wanted to scream, to break the silence with something that would make them all realize how tired I was, how much it hurt me to realize that the family I'd always considered strong was now using me as a convenient resource. Jillian, Mom's voice was softer. Do you want me to talk to Vanessa? I'll talk to her myself. I knew that I would have to give an ultimatum, otherwise Vanessa would think that my boundaries could be ignored. I just didn't know if she was ready to hear the truth. I squatted down in front of Ethan, looking him straight in the eye, but he still avoided my gaze, picking at the edge of a napkin on the table, and at that moment I realized that my sister had gone so far that now she was not just using me, but purposefully destroying my relationship with my nephews, trying to force them to think that I'm the one who pulls away, who repeatedly leaves them for their selfish adult affairs. And this thought hit me harder than any of our quarrels. Ethan, I said calmly, even though everything was boiling inside me. You know that's not true, right? He finally looked up at me, full of contradictions, and shrugged his shoulders. She said you didn't want to take us, he muttered, averting his eyes again. I gritted my teeth, trying to control myself, because I wasn't angry at him, but at Vanessa, for allowing herself to use her own children as a bargaining chip in our conflict. I ran my hand through his dark hair, gently, soothingly, and, smiling at Lucas, who was snuggled up to me, straightened up. Okay, guys, let's go home, I said, taking both of them by the hand. Where are your jackets? We left them in Mom's car, Ethan replied. She said she'd be back in a couple of hours. A couple of hours? I asked, feeling a wave of indignation rise inside me. She left you here with no jackets, no money, and not even a plan for how you're going to get back. Ethan shrugged his shoulders. She said you were coming, he repeated softly. I took a deep breath, feeling my heart racing, because there was no longer any doubt. Vanessa wasn't just counting on me, she considered it my duty. In her eyes, I had no right to refuse, I had no right to put my life first, because if I didn't, she would go to extreme measures, such as leaving 2 minor children alone in a huge shopping mall, knowing that sooner or later I would come for them anyway. I didn't say another word. I just took the boys by the hand and headed for the exit, going over in my head exactly what I would tell my sister when she finally showed up. Vanessa called 3 hours later. Where are the boys? What is it? She asked instead of greeting me, her voice sounding annoyed, as if I had disrupted some of her plans that she hadn't even bothered to tell me about. At home, I replied sharply. What do you mean at home? There was confusion in her voice now. Did you take them away? Of course you did, Vanessa, you left them alone in the damn mall. In the end, my voice broke into a scream because I couldn't hold it in anymore. Don't be dramatic, she replied dryly. It's a safe place, and they knew you were coming. I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose, trying not to explode even more. It's not okay, Vanessa, it's not just a little mistake, I said icily. You put them in danger. They could get lost, they could get scared, something could happen to them. She snorted. Stop lecturing me, Jillian, you're not even a mother to talk about how to raise children. Maybe not my mother, I paused, feeling my insides tremble with rage. But lately I've been taking care of their lives. There was a tense pause on the other end. What are you talking about? That if you're going to keep acting like your children are my problem and not yours, then maybe we should really discuss who needs them more? I heard her sharp intake of breath. Are you threatening me? No, I'm trying to make you open your eyes, Vanessa, I said clearly, each word like a blow, each word with a harshness that I could no longer contain myself. Because if you continue to behave like this, if you ever leave them alone again or make them think that no one needs them except me, I will seriously consider talking to a lawyer. You wouldn't dare. I dare, I said calmly. And if you don't care about what I say, then maybe you'll at least be afraid that you might be deprived of the rights to your own children. I could hear her breathing, fast and angry. She hadn't expected such a blow. You're just jealous, she finally spat out. You're jealous that I have a life and you don't. I chuckled. I have a life, Vanessa, I just don't leave my loved ones for her. Silence again. Forget I called you, she finally said, and the connection was cut off. I looked at the phone and exhaled. That evening, I put the boys to bed, read them a book, kissed them both on the top of their heads, and left their room feeling strangely, heavily tired, as if I were carrying a huge weight that I had finally shed. I knew it wasn't over. But I also knew that if Vanessa really didn't come to her senses, would do exactly what I promised. But despite the fact that my life finally belonged to me again, despite the fact that I felt free and happy again, despite the fact that there was a person next to me who I genuinely liked, there was a shadow of worry in the depths of my soul, a shadow that I could not completely ignore, because that no matter how hard I tried, I was still thinking about boys. I haven't seen them for over 3 months. Vanessa didn't write or call, and although I wanted to believe that she had finally taken responsibility for her life and taking care of the children, that she had changed and realized her mistakes, I knew my sister too well to build illusions. She wasn't the kind of person who suddenly pulled herself together and changed her behavior for no good reason. If she was silent for so long, it means either she found someone else who now played my role, or she just cut me off on principle. You're thinking about her again, aren't you? I looked up from my coffee cup and met the gaze of Jason, who was staring at me intently over the table. We were sitting in a small cozy cafe not far from his gym, where we already had a tradition of having dinner after evening classes. He was smart, observant, and patient enough not to pressure me with questions, but I knew he understood everything. A little, I admitted, wrapping the spoon in my fingers. I'm just thinking about the boys. Jason nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. You haven't seen them since you set the boundaries? No, I sighed heavily. I do not even know how they are doing. Do you want to find out? I was silent. Did I want to? Yes, but at the same time, I was afraid. I was afraid to see them and realize that they were mad at me, that they no longer considered me a part of their lives, that Vanessa had told them her version of the story, in which I had simply abandoned them because I was tired of responsibility. If it bothers you, maybe something should be done? Jason asked cautiously. I shook my head. Vanessa is not the kind of person who admits her mistakes. She would rather be silent forever than make the first move. Then you'll have to make it yourself, he shrugged. The only question is, are you ready? I wasn't sure. But nevertheless, the next day, when I was driving home after work, my fingers dialed my mother's number on their own. She answered almost immediately. Jillian, darling, how are you? There was caution in her voice, and I knew she still felt guilty about the conversation we had 3 months ago. Okay, Mom, I took a deep breath. I just wanted to know how Ethan and Lucas were doing. There was a pause on the other end of the line. They're fine, she finally said. Vanessa has them? Yes, of course, but there was something wrong with her voice, and my chest ached uncomfortably. Mom, what happened? She sighed. Look, I'm not sure about all the details, but Vanessa seems tired. She started leaving the boys with us more often on weekends. Dad talked to her, tried to find out if she was okay, but she shrugged it off, saying it was just a lot of work. Do you believe her? No, Mom admitted. I gripped the phone tighter. Do you think they're safe? I do not know, dear, she said softly. But if you want my opinion, you should talk to her. That same night, I stood in front of Vanessa's apartment door, nervously shifting from one foot to the other. I wasn't sure how she would react. Maybe he'll slam the door in my face. He might yell at me. But I knew one thing, I couldn't just ignore it all. I knocked. It took a few seconds before the door opened. Vanessa was standing in front of me. But it wasn't the Vanessa I was used to seeing. She looked tired, haggard, dark circles under her eyes, disheveled hair, and two thin shoulders under a stretched sweater. I stared at her in silence, trying to figure out exactly what had happened in those 3 months. Jillian, she said softly, and there was no anger or sarcasm in her voice. Just fatigue. May I come in? She hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside to let me in. The apartment was quiet. Vanessa closed the door and leaned against the wall, crossing her arms over her chest. Why are you here? I looked into her eyes. Because I'm worried about the boys. And for you. She chuckled, but it was an empty, joyless sound. Well, that's unexpected. Vanessa. I took a step closer. What happened? She was silent. I waited. And finally, she exhaled. Ryan's gone. I blinked at him. What? 2 months ago, she shrugged, but I could see how tense her shoulders were. He said that he was not ready for a serious relationship, that he did not want to be a part of this whole drama with children, with divorce. He just left. Vanessa. I thought I could handle it, she continued, as if she hadn't heard me. But then the problems started at work, the bills piled up, the boys started asking why you weren't coming anymore, and I realized that. She covered her face with her hands. Damn, I'm not coping, Jillian. I stood in silence, digesting her words. I didn't want to say, I told you so. I didn't want to gloat. I just wanted to know what to do next. Why didn't you call me? She lowered her arms and looked at me with reddened eyes. Because I was too proud. Because I blamed you for everything, when in fact I was only mad at myself. I swallowed. Where are the boys? She rubbed her hand wearily over her face. They think it's okay. I'm trying, but, Jill, I'm tired. I looked at my sister. She really looked broken. And I knew I couldn't just turn around and leave. Let's start by getting enough sleep, I said quietly. And then we'll figure it out together. And this time Vanessa didn't mind. It's selfish to expect that I will pick up your children every day, even if I have my own life and my own responsibilities. It's selfish to leave them alone in the mall, knowing that I'll have to come pick them up because I can't leave them in the lurch. Selfish is manipulating me, making me feel guilty for wanting something for myself. I spoke softly, but there was steel in my voice. Over the many months that I had spent adjusting my life to Vanessa's needs, I had accumulated so much anger and resentment that now that this anger had finally found a way out, I couldn't stop. I'm working, I have a career, I have plans, I have a man I want to spend time with, I continued, crossing my arms over my chest, looking directly at my sister, who was sitting with a haughty look, as if my words did not impress her at all. And you know what? I have no desire to exchange this vacation for another 2-week marathon of looking after your children. Oh, is that how you talk to your family now? Vanessa chuckled, leaning back in her chair. It's funny how quickly you forgot about everything that I went through after the divorce. I gritted my teeth. No, I haven't forgotten. I remember every tear, I remember every night when you sat in my kitchen crying over Mark. I remember how my parents and I tried to support you, how I took care of the boys because you weren't able to. But Vanessa, that was almost a year ago. A year. How much longer are you going to use this divorce as an excuse for your behavior? She pressed her lips into a thin line, and for the first time in the entire conversation, something like indecision flashed in her eyes. But before she could answer, Mom intervened. "Jillian, darling, you're being too strict," she said softly but reproachfully. "Your sister has really been through a lot, and if she can't afford a vacation, then—" I whirled on her. "Mom, I love you, but do you understand what you're doing right now? You're making excuses again. You're supporting Vanessa again that she thinks it's okay to put her life on me. She just wants to spend time with her family," her father said softly. "No, she wants me to pay for everything." I looked right at him. Let's be honest, if Vanessa really wanted to go on vacation with the boys, she would have started saving money herself, she would have planned the trip herself, but instead she expects me to do it for her. Mom opened her mouth, but couldn't find anything to say. "And Vanessa?" She just looked at me with an icy smile. "You've changed, Jillian," she said at last. "You weren't so tough before." "You haven't been this cocky before," I retorted. There was silence. The boys sat quietly, slouched in their chairs, and I felt a pang of guilt, because, of course, they were not to blame for this conflict. But I couldn't give in again. I turned around, picked up my bag from the chair and headed for the exit. "So you're just going to leave?" I heard Vanessa's voice behind me. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. "Yes," I replied calmly. "Because I won't let you use me anymore." And, without looking back, she left the house. I stood on the soft sand, feeling the warm ocean breeze caress my skin, my heart beating in my chest with such force that it seemed you could hear it even over the sound of the surf, and I looked at the man who had become the closest, dearest, most real to me in recent months, and I understood that this moment is not just a fairy tale, not just a magical night on the other side of the world, but something much more important, real, something that I didn't even realize I was looking for all these years. Jason was still on one knee, clutching a velvet box with a perfect ring in his hands, and in his eyes shone absolute confidence, the very look from which doubts and fears disappeared, from which you just wanted to say yes and not think about anything else, because if there was a place in the world where I would like to be, it was right here, next to him. "Yes," I repeated, smiling through my tears, and before he could get up, I bent down and hugged him tightly, feeling everything inside fill with such light, such joy that for a moment I even forgot about everything that was outside this island, this beach, this moment. He laughed, hugging me to him, and then he unwrapped the box, took out the ring and carefully put it on my finger, sliding his thumb over my hand, as if sealing this moment into reality, as if making it not just a beautiful picture against the sunset, but something that will stay with us forever. "You're my fiancé now," he said with a smile, interlacing our fingers. "I'm your fiancé now," I repeated, feeling the words fill me with warmth. We stood there for a long time, listening to the waves gently rolling onto the shore, as the evening air was filled with the aromas of salt water and flowers, as the light wind played with my hair, and it seemed to me that I had never been so happy, so calm, so confident in my future. But when we returned to the hotel, reality reminded us of itself. I turned on my phone, which I hadn't checked since this morning, and saw a flurry of messages. From my mom. From Vanessa. From Dad. I sighed wearily, scrolling through the list. "Mother, call me when you can. This is important. Dad, daughter, we need to talk. Vanessa, I hope you're happy because everything is falling apart here." I pressed my lips together, slowly realizing that my short escape from family problems had come to an end. "Is something wrong?" Jason asked, seeing my expression change. I exhaled, putting my phone away. "Not now," I said, hugging him again. "One more night." Because I knew that as soon as we returned, as soon as I opened the door to my old life again, everything would turn around again, and I would have to make a choice that I might not have been fully prepared for. When we returned home after our vacation, I felt completely different than before, as if during those 2 weeks spent in the sun, Among turquoise waves and endless beaches, something inside me finally fell into place, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the lightness that comes when you no longer have to carry other people's problems, justify your own desires, or put other people's needs above your own. Jason offered to move in with me almost as soon as we unpacked our bags. "My lease ends in a month," he said, leaning against the door frame and watching me with a soft smile. "And to be honest, I don't want to spend money on a new apartment when I know that I only want to be with you." I froze, thinking about his words, but inside I already knew the answer. "Then move in," I said, meeting his eyes. "Are you sure?" There was no doubt in his voice, but I could see that it was important for him to hear it from me. I came closer and ran my fingers over his cheek. "More than enough." He smiled and bent down, kissing me so that all the questions that might still be left just disappeared. I didn't really think much when I posted a photo of my wedding ring on social media. It was an impulse, a moment of joy that I wanted to share with everyone who was dear to me. I didn't expect it to cause such a reaction. The next morning, my phone was bursting with notifications. Congratulations from colleagues, friends, and distant relatives who haven't written to me in years. But one message still stood out. It was Mom. "Jillian, I saw your post. Congratulations, dear." I smiled, but before I could even answer, the bell rang. "Thanks, Mom," I said, carefully choosing my tone. "Your father and I were talking," she continued, and there was an unusual hesitancy in her voice. "And we realized that we owe you an apology." I froze. "Apologize?" "Yes," Mom sighed heavily. "We were so focused on helping Vanessa, so worried about her, that we didn't think at all about how it affected you. We didn't notice how much was piled on you, and how much you had to endure." I was silent because this conversation was something I had been waiting for months, but when it finally happened, it suddenly became difficult for me to find the words. "We'd really like you and Jason to come to dinner this weekend," Mom continued. "Vanessa and the boys will be here too." I hesitated. "Mom, I'm not sure that's a good idea." "Please," her voice cracked. "We want to fix everything." After a long discussion with Jason, who, as always, remained calm and supportive, I agreed. When I entered my parents' house on Saturday evening, I felt different from the last time. Now there was no tension here, no oppressive feeling that I was about to be cornered again. I felt that I had come not to justify myself, not to fight, but just to be myself, with people I loved, but with whom I was now setting clear boundaries. Mom hugged me tightly, and my father warmly shook Jason's hand, sincerely glad to see him. Vanessa, of course, did not rush to me with apologies, but she was cordial, albeit restrained. But the boys were beaming with happiness when they saw me. "Aunt Jillian!" Lucas exclaimed, rushing towards me with open arms. "We missed you so much." "And I've missed you," I said, hugging him. Ethan came over too, smiling a little more restrainedly, but I could see in his eyes that he was happy too. Dinner was surprisingly quiet. My parents tried to get to know Jason better, asking him about his work, interests, and travels, and I could see that they really wanted to establish a relationship, not just pretend. Vanessa was silent for most of the evening, but surprisingly, she didn't say a single sarcastic remark. When Mom raised her glass to Jason and me, her eyes filled with tears. "We couldn't be happier for the two of you," she said, looking at us with such sincerity that I suddenly realized she really realized her mistake. Vanessa never apologized that night. But a few days later, she texted me. I looked at the screen and realized that this was her way of making the first move. I agreed. Our relationship was still strained, but at least we started talking again. I didn't expect her to admit guilt anymore, because I knew it wasn't in her nature. But if she was willing to make an effort to establish a relationship, then that was enough. In the following months, I found a new balance. I still spent time with my nephews, but now only when I could and wanted to, and not because it was expected of me. Jason and I have established a life together, planning a wedding for next year. Vanessa has become more independent. She got a promotion, started paying her rent herself, and became more responsible with the boys. Did my opposition to her play a role in these changes? I did not know. But one thing I knew for sure: when I finally put my own happiness first, I became not only happier, but also better as a sister, as an aunt, as a partner. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to love yourself enough to set boundaries. And this is not selfishness at all. It's a necessity.